I'm also, by the way, very puzzled with the ease with which some of you are recommending some member states to leave the euro. This, once again, is complete contrast to the positions taken by the Prime Minister of Britain, that, for instance, in the G8 summit in Camp David, was saying explicitly that it is in his national interest that Greece stays in the euro area.
A flavour bad-tempered at times of the debate this week, but to look back over the last year and ahead, I'm joined by 5 members of the European Parliament. We have Dimitris Droutsas, who is a Greek socialist MEP, formerly Foreign Minister of Greece. You resigned around a year ago, in fact, to come here. Timothy Kirkhope, former leader of the British Conservatives here in the Parliament. We also have Judith Sargentini, who is a Dutch Green MEP. Alex Lambsdorff from the German Liberals. You also, like Dimitris, have seen the fortunes of your party fall this year, and we have Nigel Farage, who would argue that he's seen the fortunes of his one rise, leader of the UK Independence Party. Of course, now we're all talking about a referendum in the UK. But before we get to that, let me ask each of you, it has been a surprising year. Many things have happened that we can't have predicted. Alex Lambsdorff, for you, what's been the thing that most surprised you over the last 12 months?
The one thing that surprised me most was the determination of 25 member states to go ahead with a fiscal compact over British and Czech opposition. Usually one tries to keep everyone together. In that case, we decided if the Brits don't want to join, let them go their own way.
Timothy? Your government actually blocked that one.
Yes, yes, it did. I think quite rightly too. But my own surprise is probably none surprise. I mean, you say, lots of things have been going on. They have indeed been going on, but I think in many ways people have taken the sort of positions that you would have anticipated them to take over a year ago. The same people who want a sort of more integrated Europe remain of that view. Those of us who actually want a different kind of Europe have continued to argue for it, but the thing hasn't moved.
Dimitris?
I wouldn't single out something specific or a specific event. For me, the most not surprising thing, but annoying thing maybe, is the inability, if you want, of the EU and EU leaders to find real credible answers for tackling the economic crisis, and also to see that national positions, national interests are becoming more and more important. A renationalization, if you want, of EU policies.
Judith, I mean, has it been about the incompetence or the impotence of EU leaders, do you think?
A lot of them are men, yes. I would say I think it is the incompetence. And what I found most incompetent is the fiscal compact, where they actually decided to pass by the institutions that are there, the European Parliament, the Commission, and just make their own new group. Same countries, new institution. Forgetting that within a crisis you actually have to stay with those rules and those certainties that are there.
Nigel, what surprised you about the last 12 months?
What surprises me is that 5 countries have now been bailed out within the Eurozone. The 6th is just round the corner. Public opinion, north, south, east and west of Europe is changing rapidly against this centralised model. And what surprises me is that so few people inside these institutions are even prepared to contemplate there might be something wrong with the Euro projects. And I feel now, when I come to this building, I'm sort of surrounded by Scientologists. I'm surrounded by some weird cult who, even as disaster engulfs everything, continue to believe. I'm amazed more of them haven't woken up.
This disaster is nothing compared to the disasters we've had in European history before. This is the attempt to bind Europe together. In the United Kingdom, Timothy said so, doesn't want to have a part of that, so wants to be separate, which is fine. It doesn't want to be in the Euro, doesn't want to be in the Schengen area. That's fine. It's a sovereign British decision. They can do that. Nigel would probably agree with me on that one. However, if you look at European history and look at the disasters that we faced in the past, the disaster of, losing a couple of months and stabilizing our currency, I think, by comparison, it pales.
But when I said before I wasn't surprised by the sort of static nature of the responses and the attitudes, I mean, I think that's very important. And in saying that, Britain has decided to take a particular view on its own. I mean, Britain is a major player in the European Union. I mean, Nigel doesn't want us to be in the European Union in future. But
well, many in your party don't sound terribly keen about it either.
Well, you say we're a major player.
I think it's fair that we are major players in the European Union. I think the problem has been is that the European Union and its institutions are just not looking as if they're going to be flexible enough to move into a new situation. I mean, they have remained too static. We need to, I think, put more British influence into this. We need to work with partners, but we need to actually try and ensure there is enough flexibility to cope with all the countries and their different developments.
But who are they and who are we?
Out of the fiscal compact. I mean, this is Madame Merkel's central achievement is to have the European stabilization mechanism, that's solidarity, and the fiscal compact, that's solidity.
How is it working, though, Alex? How is it helping countries like Greece
and Spain and Italy? It is not working well enough, and I agree with Dimitrios on this, because the decisions that have been taken were taken in a trial and error approach, a step-by-step approach. Some call it a muddling through approach. I don't hold that against the heads of state and government in the beginning of the crisis 2 years ago. Today, however, I think we need a decisive step, like a debt redemption pact, that builds a firewall across the vulnerable economies of the Eurozone and then stabilizes the situation once and for all. I believe the summit decisions were not sufficient to do that.
But another thing that's become very clear, isn't it, Judith, and you will face this in your elections in the Netherlands in September, is that EU leaders can't, and neither can you here at the Parliament, make decisions and then expect everyone to fall in line. There is such a thing as elections, democracy, people, and they keep biting you all on the bottom, really.
But they will keep biting us if we say this in Brussels, or if Prime Minister Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, in Brussels he goes along, and I appreciate that because we need to solve a crisis together. But as soon as he crosses the Belgian-Dutch border, he changes his tune. How can you believe a politician, and with that, how can you trust in all of us if you change your tune? And Nigel says, hey, we're in a big crisis and it's a mess, and we all agree. I think every single member state, every single politician here says the crisis is there, but what's the answer? And the answer is not withdrawing from Brussels. The answer is working together, and I agree that...
But taking public opinion with you, though.
Yes, but taking public opinion with you is not going to happen if you keep changing your tune, and that's the start of it. And I think what happened last week was not enough, but at least it was a start, and it showed that we could take sovereignty back, but from the banking sector.
How is the Greek economy going to recover just because we all have to display European solidarity? I mean, that's the question, isn't it? How is Spain actually going to recover if she stays trapped inside the prison of the euro? And this, I think, is the fundamental mistake. Even on your side of the argument, you should be recognising that some of those countries should never have joined the euro, and it'd be far better off for the people to leave it.
But they're there, and leaving is not far better, because you'll end up with your own coin and a huge debt in euros.
Okay, Timothy, and then...
I know, but the trouble with Nigel and his nihilist approach, which is basically we just pull out, I think it's basically dishonest, because it is saying something which, yes, it does have certain attractions. When people get frustrated, they say, well, okay, we better get away from this. Let's get out. But what's so dishonest in their position always has been and always will be, they have nothing else. There is no alternative for a major economic power like
global
like the
free
UK.
trade, Tim. How about that?
Yes, yes.
The Commonwealth,
it sounds very
free trade with Europe. Better than this, isn't it?
Trouble is, Nigel, you're like a market trader. You're not offering a guarantee, and your product's going to fall apart in a few weeks.
Well, I think this product's falling apart, don't you?
But is it any more honest to say to the British people, we can renegotiate our position with Brussels and repatriate powers from Brussels back to London, which is what your leadership is suggesting? Alex, from what you know of both how this place works mechanically, constitutionally, and in terms of the goodwill that is there towards Britain, is that possible?
Well, I think it would be possible for Britain to renegotiate a separate deal, a different deal with the European Union, but not while staying in all decision-making structures. And this is the dilemma that I personally see, without making any judgments about British domestic debates here. But in the Tory position, I see this dilemma. You want to stay in, on the one hand, in all the decision-making structures, on Schengen, on economic policy-making, everything, in the Council, in the Parliament,
and on the single market above all.
A single market for financial services above all. But at the same time, you don't want to play the game that the others are playing. I think that is intellectually dishonest up to a point, because you cannot maintain this position. And on the continent, of course, there's huge frustration in the United Kingdom.
I mean, let Alex make his point, though.
Because the practical policies of the United Kingdom in the European institutions are obstruction, slowing down processes, slowing down the integration. Now, Nigel doesn't want this kind of integration. That's fine. But when you're in and you stop everything from happening, from moving forward.
But the Prime Minister is actually saying go ahead, isn't he?
But you mustn't mix that up with the constructive approach. I mean, there is a constructive approach in our attitude towards Europe. We have actually made a lot of moves, particularly internal markets, free movement, and so on. We are very much involved with these issues, and I want those to continue. I'm sure that is the resolve.
Can we go back to that bigger picture? Because we're talking free trade and world trade. I'm from a country that makes its money trading in Europe, but I also know that if it wasn't for a European trade regime, that we would be nowhere with China, with Brazil, and even the United Kingdom would be nowhere if there was not a trading bloc against others.
Switzerland
is in our trading bloc.
Little Switzerland
makes its money through us.
Little Switzerland has more free trade deals with the 30 biggest economies in the world than we do. All of which goes to show, with the WTO having basically got as far as it can, bilateralism is the way forward, and if a little country like Switzerland can do it, then much bigger trading nations like you and I can do it.
The fact they don't have it. Let me go back to...
Well, it's true.
For industries, for our naive, for small, for
they're rich as well, and we're not very rich.
They don't want lots of bilateral agreements where they have, in their export, they have to deal with bilateral agreements in this country, that country, and this country. A global trade arrangement in which Europe plays a strong role is good for our economy, for the exports to other regions of the world. I fully agree with you that.
Let's go back
to
Greece,
if we're banned from making our own bilateral free trade deals around the world, that is a big disadvantage to trading nations like the Netherlands and the UK.
But if my colleague says Britain is incredibly important to the European Union, I would like somebody to say, as are the other 26 member states, for Britain. That the fact that we are interlinked and that we cannot exist as individual countries in a world that is more and more globalizing. Are you going back again to the trade agreements? You have not had individual trade unions.
Nowhere else in the rest of the world has a customs union apart from here.
Southern Africa is a customs union.
Isn't it a fact, though, that in the end, as Norway has to do, and Switzerland, you still have to negotiate with these same people, whether you're in a free trade or a union, and you still need goodwill. And that is what is draining away, apparently.
Well,
Wouldn't you agree, Nigel, from looking at the debates this week?
We're in the most impossible position, at least David Cameron is. You know, however much he tries to be nice here, it was clear from the chamber this week that everybody hates him. He goes back home, and he's accused of not being Eurosceptic enough, and the British are piggy in the middle, and they haven't made their minds up whether they want to be fully in this thing or fully out of this thing. And they're the only two logical positions for our country to take.
Where do you think we're going to be, very briefly, 12 months from now, Alex?
I hope we will be in a place where we have a firewall across the vulnerable economies. I hope we will be far more down the road to discussing in Europe of two speeds. I hope we will be. Hope springs eternal, and so I'm an optimist by nature. I hope we will be in this place with a stable currency, with growing economies, and with a more honest debate about a two-speed Europe, which is exactly what we need.
Timothy?
Well, I hope we become more realistic about what we can achieve working together in cooperation, and not be too ambitious.
Can you tell us where you think we'll be rather than where you hope we'll be on this side of the table?
Again, I have to be optimistic, and we have all to be optimistic. First of all, I would wish, but I'm honest. I cannot guarantee this. I would wish that in a year's time from now we won't have again such kind of rounds of discussion talking about Greece, about the crisis, about the eventuality of Greece maybe leaving the euro. That in the next months to come we will find the definite answers both at the level of the European Union but of course also at the national level in Greece, that the Greek government and the Greek people will show to everybody and will prove to everybody that they are willing to do whatever is necessary.
Judith.
12 months from now we're close to German national elections, if I'm correct. So that's going to be a very crucial time again, and I really hope that Ms. Merkel keeps her pro-European responsibility there, and that she's being helped by 26 prime ministers that understand there's only one future, which is a future together.
Nigel, briefly.
I think Greece will have left the euro, will have gone through 2 or 3 unstable weeks, will be slowly, as the Icelandics did, be beginning to recover. And I think the demands in Portugal and Spain and other countries for them to leave will grow. And I think right across the continent there'll be a much bigger debate going on amongst the citizens about what kind of Europe do we really want.